Well, our next speaker is Patty Nowak, and a lot of you, I'm sure, have known she's been around for a few years or a couple decades or more.
Quite 50 decades.
Oh, okay. Oh, okay. So, she's kind of one of the gray hairs in this room, and I can say that because I have a lot of gray hair. So she's the State Rangeland Management Specialist for the USDA and our CES, and she has a lot of field experience. It's always nice to have somebody up here that's tromped around a lot of ground, particularly in Nevada. So, Patty, it's all yours.
All right, they had to get a step so that they could see me over the podium here. So I hope you can see me and hear me. So I'm basically going to talk about what Nevada has done with the Pinyon, Juniper, Woodlands, and our ecological sites. And I want to thank Dr. Tamsin Stringham, who's in the audience here from UNR. Her and I have been working since, 2009 on ecological sites in Nevada. So let's see if I can run this without turning off the streaming. All right, so what's an ecological site? NRCS uses this framework to describe rangelands and forest lands for assessments, land suitability, and land management planning. But the most important thing, it's a soil-based classification system, so it's not a vegetation system. So if you notice in the photo, there's at least 4 ecological sites here. So we have a clay pan site here, shallow soils to bedrock, a low sage site. This is a mountain mahogany site here on the rock outcrops. We have a deep soil here, a mountain big sagebrush site. It's our loamy 12 to 14 site. And probably one of my favorite woodlands, this is an aspen woodland site. This is a deep soil with high organic matter, and I have a soil named for this site. So it's called Pyropatty. Anyway, so that'll give you an idea of what I like to do. But anyway, so we have an updated ecological site definition. It's a distinctive kind of land based on reoccurring soils, landform, geologic, and climatic characteristics that differs from other kinds of land in its ability to produce distinctive kinds and amounts of vegetation or plant communities, and its ability to respond similarly to management actions and natural disturbances. This last portion was added most recently on these responses to the management actions and natural disturbances. And you can find the approved ESDs at our plants.usda.gov website. If you scroll down on the left-hand side, you'll see where it says Ecological Site Information System. So we have a lot of steps to go through to get these sites approved to the public. And so if you are on our website and there's a site that you want and it's not available, just go ahead and contact me or your state range specialist in your states and see if they'll give you a draft copy. We have a lot of site descriptions that are filled out and in the background, but we haven't gone through all the steps to approve those yet. So anyway. So I'm not going to go as far back as Rick. He gave you a really good background on the Pinyon Juniper Woodlands. But SCS, we were the Soil Conservation Service before, 1994? And this SCS started mapping in Nevada back in the 40s. And so as you see in 1954, the Society of American Foresters had described the Pinyon Juniper cover type that occurred between the sagebrush and the interior ponderosa pine. And so that was our guidance when we first started mapping. And so we actually have some of the old soil surveys in our office and the old maps, and you can see where they would use codes for the different cover types. In 1967 and 76, SCS came out with a couple different range handbooks. And we called these woodlands grazable woodlands. And they were a forest land in which the understory includes an integral part of the forest plant community. But there was a sufficient understory that could be grazed, so they were fairly open woodlands. And in 1980, the Soil Conservation Service came out with their National Forestry Manual. And they described forest land as having at least 25% overstory canopy. So where does these little grazable woodlands come into this? So what Nevada did in 1984, and this is when we were actively mapping. So we had really started mapping in the 60s, 70s, and 80s. And We had some interim guidelines. We developed a key. So we looked at the age of the trees, 150-year-old. This was pre-European settlement. A lot of Nevada was settled during the gold mining era. And we used 10% canopy for these juniper woodlands. So it differed from the forest land concept, which was the 25% canopy cover. We had to have physical evidence of mature potential, harvesting or fire, and certainly a lot of the woodlands around the mining communities of Austin and Virginia City, a lot of the trees were cut down. The nice thing about the juniper is it persists on the landscape, so we can find those old cut trees. Another criteria we used was the topographic and our soil features that limited the fire intensity. So we weren't having crown fires. So very shallow, rocky soils with exposed bedrock. The understory was typically less than 600 pounds per acre, unless you had a much open canopy of 10% canopy, then we would get up to about 1,000 pounds per acre. All right, so typically our soil surveys are Order 3 soil survey. The scale is 1 to 20,000 to 1 to 63,000. So if you look at the soil surveys in Nevada, some of them are really refined and they're probably at that scale of 1 to 20,000. But depending on the mapper, some of them are lumpers and splitters. I'm probably more of a splitter than a lumper, but I've worked on soil surveys since 1983. And I've worked in the Pinyon Juniper for that long. So I know how we've mapped, and I know where we have problems, and we continually are updating these surveys. So our surveys can be found at the Web Soil Survey, and if anybody needs help working that system, I'll be happy to help you. So anyway, so 1997, I see one of the authors in the back here of this guidance, Inventory, Classifying, and Correlating Juniper and Pinyon Communities to Soils in Western U.S. So even in the 90s, we were struggling on what to do with these pinyon juniper woodlands. So they weren't quite forests, they aren't quite rangeland. So Pat Shaver and others, Pat's in the back there, was an author on this document. I actually have some hard copies. This is also available as a PDF. You can Google this or probably find it on the NRCS Publications website, but I actually found some boxes of these still. So the woodland criteria in this document, forest occurs when trees in mature, greater than 150-year-old or near mature plant community are greater than 15% canopy cover. And then we started looking at height, 12 to 16 feet or better. Overall, the trees, the mature and near mature trees had to be at least 25% canopy cover. So that differed a little bit in what Nevada had been doing. We had been using the 10% canopy cover. It also looked at the bedrock-controlled landforms and the topographic features that limited the spread of wildfire. All right, and there's some tables and drawings in here of the different age classes. There's actually yield tables, so we can estimate pounds per acre of trees. And so like a 10-foot tall tree with a crown diameter of 8 to 10 feet is about 4 pounds of new growth. So it's a great document. We use it all the time. So, but as the years have gone by, we focus now more on habitat and the sage grouse initiative. We've started looking at our mapping, reviewing what we've done with these woodland sites. So the soil scientists have been instrumental in getting this going in Nevada. We've looked at the old mapping concepts. We're starting to look at soil characteristics at each of those sites, running transects, we're coring trees, trying to figure out really where those woodland sites are. I also updated the brush management specification in Nevada. We have a pinyon juniper specification now for this conservation practice. And it focuses on removal of pinyon and juniper, but it gives you guidelines on what is really the invaded pinyon or expansion woodlands. And so as we get our masticators out there, we want to make sure that we are actually on a range site and not a forest site. Part of that requirement is the cultural resources assessment. And so our archaeologists have gone out there and found in these huge woodland areas, these old historic trees with a lot of cultural sites around those trees, whether they're rock rings or chippings or so. There's a lot of cultural significance around associated with these old woodland sites that we want to protect. So when we're out there, we actually flag these areas off so that the chainsaws and the masticators don't take these big old trees down. Okay, so part of our guidance now that we're updating our sites is looking at the tree growth form, and Robin Tausch and others have come up with this pinyon and juniper field guide. So we look at our crown shapes, branch structure and size, a presence of dead wood. A lot of the old junipers will carry a lot of old dead wood, the bark, and the leader growth. So here's just an example of old growth. This tree that's on the, this big old tree with the juniper here, I can't find my cursor. This root was at least a foot in diameter and extended all the way down the slope into the canyon. It was amazing. We found this on the Jackson Mountains northwest of Winnemucca, Nevada last summer with Tamsin's crew when we were out there. So it's an awesome old juniper. Robin Tausch took us out to some old junipers that are north of Reno, and they were over 1,000 years old, and some of these. And they're actually not very tall trees. This one was probably about 25 feet tall. Also the mature trees and the young and immature trees on the different stands. Okay, so the soil scientists started digging holes, lots of holes, running around, looking where we thought that there was some old trees. And so they've come up with some characteristics and a little bit of a key so that as we're out there trying to update our ecological sites and developing state and transition models. So we always dig holes. That's one of the first things you have to do when you're working with ecological sites. So the soils are typically shallow to bedrock. This tape here is actually in centimeters. It's not in inches, but they're typically less than 20 inches deep. They're more like 4 to 10 inches. They're skeletal, which means they have a lot of rock fragments in the profile. They can have a thin mollic epipedon, usually less than 6 inches, and it's weak. So there isn't a lot of organic matter. They're not very dark. They have low available water capacity, and there's lots of areas of exposed bedrock. So when I'm looking for woodland site, I'm always looking for bedrock first on the hillsides. The slopes are typically greater than 15%, and they occur on a variety of parent materials. So they're scattered throughout Nevada, these pinyon juniper woodlands. So I just did a little assessment of what we have in Nevada, and our overstory canopy cover ranges from 10 to 35% in that reference community. And how we separate out the different sites is the overstory and understory composition. So the overstory, we just have some straight pinyon sites. We have straight juniper sites, Utah juniper. We also have western juniper sites in northwestern Nevada on the California border, and different understory compositions. We use a site index, so we'll core trees and look at the heights of those trees. We usually core at least three old trees in a stand. And we use root collar as root collar measurements that convert to basal area. And so John Howell in 1914 and David Shinaki in 1986 have some site indexes. So we split up our sites by site index and understory and overstory composition. Okay, so here's just what we have in Nevada right now, and like I said, we are updating those, so these numbers may change. MLRA 23, we share with Oregon and California. These are western juniper sites here in 23. The pinyon doesn't go this far north. Pinyon only occurs just a little farther north of Reno. So MLRA 24, there are 6 sites, pinyon and juniper in this MLRA. 25, we share with Idaho, Oregon, and Utah. There are 4 sites. Up in Idaho, though, they do have some western juniper in MLRA 25. However, it does not occur in Nevada. 26 is the Sierra Front Range, so a bit more moisture there. These are a lot of pinyon juniper woodland sites over here. There's 15. 27, we kind of get out away from the Sierra Front fairly. This is a pretty dry MLRA. There's only 3 sites in those. 28A and 28B, Central Nevada, and then A we share with Utah. There's a lot of pinyon and juniper sites, and I was surprised that there was only 7 in 28A and 9 in 28B, because that is the heart of the pinyon and juniper. That also could be a function of the mapping. Like I said, there's lumpers and splitters, and so maybe we actually have more sites that need to be split. MLRA 29 is an interesting in that there is 30 sites, and that MLRA stretches across California all the way into Utah. And what happens in that MLRA is you have a shift from winter precip in the west to summer precip. So the understory composition changes significantly there. There is, as we go east and get next to Utah, we have Turbinella oak and Gamble's oak in the understory. When you're up towards California and the White Mountains and the Inyo Mountains, you're not going to see those species. You're going to have black sagebrush and mountain sage, some Wyoming sagebrush on those sites. And then in MLRA 30, there's 17 sites, and that's basically the Sky Islands in the Mojave Desert. So even in those areas, we do have pinyon and juniper persisting. And then this map on the right is just the extent of Utah juniper in our soils database, so we can query the database and just show where Utah juniper occurs. So interesting comparison of what sites we have and where it actually occurs in our soil notes. Okay, so this is a typical site. You can see the bedrock exposed. This is a 28B Central Nevada site. Understory pinyon. Big sagebrush, blue bunch, and Thurber needlegrass. So let me just get into a little bit of our state and transition model work here. We've recognized 4 states, the reference state, the current potential, which would have a little bit of cheatgrass in the understory, this infield tree state where with lack of fire, and we are getting more smaller trees in this, but if this site burns, it goes to cheatgrass. It's an annual state. Okay, so we also include a small component of trees in our rangeland ecological sites. And so there will be scattered old trees on these sites. We have savanna-type sites, which carry that lower canopy cover, and that's typically Utah juniper, these old, big old trees that are still out there on some of these old sediments, Pleistocene sediments. But these sites have a potential for a tree state in them where the trees just take over. And the rangeland sites occur from shallow to very deep soils, loamy skeletal or clay skeletal. Typically have argillic horizons, and where we get into at least a 10-inch precip zone, we're going to have a mollicapedon, which is high amounts of organic matter. So here's just our typical loamy slope 12 to 16, a very deep soil. It's a mountain big sagebrush, serviceberry, snowberry, Thurber needlegrass, blue bunch wheatgrass site. Okay, here's a black sagebrush site. This is actually with a tree component on it. So the trees have moved in and expanded onto this black sagebrush site. As the trees close, canopy, we lose that understory, and this is the model for that for one of our loamy 8 to 10 sites where the trees have moved in, and actually we have what we call a tree state now. Okay, thanks. When this site burns, it does go to cheatgrass. Okay, so when we get the masticators out there, the important thing is to look at the models. Make sure that we're on a rangeland site, and is there a restoration potential for this site? So they're doing a lot of this in eastern Nevada for sage grouse habitat, and so we just make sure that when we're out there, we look at those models, make sure we're on that invaded rangeland site, and then they bring out the masticators. Here's a project of Dr. Stringham's. She likes to water these trees, so. Any questions? All right, thank you.